Good afternoon and welcome to the continuation of the City of Pittsburgh's 2023 public budget hearings. Today we're going to begin with the Department of Finance and the three taxing bodies, and then we'll move over to our Department of Law after that. Director?
Sure. The Finance Department provides fiscal leadership for the cities focused on long-term financial health while respecting the interests of its residents. It also carries an important responsibility to ensure all entrepreneurs, visionaries, and leaders have the necessary services and city infrastructure to thrive. As the City of Pittsburgh's primary revenue generator, the Finance Department is committed to excellence in financial management for the city, of its residents, and its businesses. A quick overview: the Department of Finance has 5 major divisions, each with several subsections. Those major divisions are the Administration and Treasury Division, Business Intelligence Division, Real Estate, Tax Compliance, and Cash Management. An update for the position summary changes in 2023. There is 0.85 new full-time employees, but we can explain that. It's really one new full-time position, but it's only being partially funded through the general fund. There's also a swap of a deputy director for an assistant director, a swap of a finance system analyst for a senior enterprise applications administrator, a swap of revenue and analytics manager for one additional finance system analyst, a swap of specialist tax compliance for a technician accounting, a swap of supervisory clerk for additional assistant 2 administrative, and allocations changes between finance and 3 TBs. So overall, that's an increase of about $100,000. Summary of non-personnel changes. The Department of Finance is where the city's pension and debt service payments are budgeted. So approximately 28% of the city's operating budget is housed there. So that's why they have such a large budget. Overall, there is $7.8 million increase in the Department of Finance budget. Specifically, this is due to about $2.5 million more in pension contributions, $468,000 additional dollars for OPEB contributions, $4.7 million additional in debt service payments, and $750,000 to URA for inventory management. And now I will just go over the 3 taxing bodies quickly. The 3 taxing bodies are the City of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and Pittsburgh Public Schools. The city acts as trustee agent for properties owned jointly by the 3 taxing bodies. The 3 taxing bodies trust fund was established to pay for costs relating to the administration of these properties. A quick overview: revenues are made up of funds received from the 3 taxing bodies as well as transfers from the general fund. Expenditures are salaries and other related expenses that are incurred by the city in its employment of personnel related to the maintenance and disposition of the properties owned by the 3 taxing bodies. There is a total of 8.5 positions funded by the 3 taxing bodies. There's no personnel changes in the budget. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'll turn it over to Director Gula if there's anything you want to add in addition to that.
I honestly do not, so if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer, but I think our budget is semi-straightforward, so.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we've been joined by Councilwoman Strasburg. Any questions you may have?
You know, I probably do have some questions. If I could just have a moment and go after you, if you don't mind asking whatever questions you have.
No problem.
Yeah, I have to search for my document that I have here.
My main question is regarding tax collection.
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing there? As you're aware, there's been some hiccups over the last couple years, and so would love to get a sense of where we are.
That would probably be an understatement. But actually, currently, tax collection is going extremely well. So last year, actually, as everybody probably had seen, we had a huge delay in processing due to the extra billing provided by the parks tax. This year, we were actually able to put the parks tax on the same bill as real estate, so that cut down the volume. But with all the new systems that are now going in place, there is no delay in business tax or real estate processing. So we were actually able to disengage the lock boxes that we opened last year in order to process the backlogs. We sort of kept them on hold just in case,
Okay.
we hit a snag, but overall, it's going extremely well. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
And I'm assuming, given all of that, you also have the necessary bodies in place.
We do. Yes, we do. And that was a big, we're actually short one. So we've actually been able to accomplish that without filling all the positions, which we may be able to eliminate in the future. But yes, that was a huge help and a big reason for it.
Wonderful. That was really the main question I had, Councilwoman.
I do not have any questions at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I was just scanning to see if there's anything else. But with that, then we thank you for the excellent service you're providing to our city.
Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to the Department of Law, along with the Ethics Hearing Board.
I'll start with the Department of Law. The Department of Law provides legal advice and services as in-house corporate counsel to the City of Pittsburgh, which often involves providing advice to the mayor, city directors, city council, and various government units. It represents the city in all legal aspects of its daily governmental functions. It also represents the city in high-profile cases significantly impacting public policy and city residents' quality of life. The Department of Law operates as a quality, proactive boutique law firm, attracting talented professionals with impeccable integrity from the public and private sector. Quick overview of the law department: it is divided into several general service areas, and the divisions are as follows: federal litigation, state litigation, labor and employment, general municipal, claims, and open records officer. There is a total of 37.3 full-time employees. The 2023 operating budget calls for 2.8 new full-time employees to be funded out of the general fund. That includes one additional assistant city solicitor, one new contract administrator, one assistant, one administrative, a lead investigator, which will be shared with the ethics board, which has been removed from the budget, and 0.3 of an assistant real estate has been added, which will be shared with the 3 taxing bodies, which it comes to an overall increase of $323,817. A summary of non-personnel changes: the city law department is where the city's judgments are housed. Overall, there is $5.125 million increase in the Department of Law's budget. 67% of the increase is due to additional amounts budgeted for potential settlements and judgments. There's about $3.5 million additional in judgments, which is a 217% increase. $1.5 million additionally budgeted for federal and state legal fees, and $200,000 for outside legal counsel for labor negotiations. And quickly, I can go over the Ethics Hearing Board. The mission of the Ethics Hearing Board is to promote public trust and confidence in public services by fostering integrity and impartiality with city government. The functions of the Ethics Hearing Board is to provide advice, education, training, investigation, and enforcement of a wide range of ethics topics. The board's jurisdiction covers conflicts of interest and recusal procedures, political activity, contracting, the use of authority and public property, the employment and appointment of relatives, secondary employment restrictions, post-employment restrictions, campaign finance limitations and disclosures, as well as disclosures relating to conflicts, gifts, and financial interests. The board is comprised of 9 members, each having reputations of personal integrity and honesty. Staff serve current, former, and prospective city employees, public officials, and vendors. Staff provide advice, conduct trainings, assist with the required disclosures, publish advisory opinions, review complaints, perform investigations, hold hearings, enforce violations, maintain campaign finance reports, records and records and other duties outlined in code. The executive director serves the board appointed by the ethics officers, maintains the administrative apparatus of the board, and conducts those functions explicitly delegated to her by the board and the periods between meetings. The position summary: there are no full-time employees. The ethics hearing board. There's an overall increase. The executive manager is part-time funding for a training and development coordinator, and an investigator and engagement coordinator.
Thank you. With that, I will turn it over to our city solicitor, Ms. Kubiak, just to see if there's anything you would like to add.
Thank you very much, Councilman Lavelle. My name is Krisha Kubiak, and I'm the Solicitor and Chief Legal Officer. Thank you for allowing me to appear today to discuss the Law Department's budget for 2023. Thank you also for allowing me to appear by Zoom. I've recently contracted COVID and appreciate the consideration. Before I get into my budget, I want to extend my thanks to the council members who have all welcomed me into the city and included me in your decision-making process. I very much enjoyed working with you and with your excellent staffs while you have tackled important issues such as maintaining abortion access, safety for residents, homelessness, the environment, and blight. I would also like to thank Dan Friedson, Solicitor for Council, who from the beginning has been a great partner. With respect to the law budget, there are no capital expenditures. The big changes from last year's budget fall into 3 categories. I will review them each briefly and then welcome any questions. The first is real estate. In 2022, the Law Department succeeded in speeding up the contracting process through law. We hope to accomplish something similar to that in the real estate area. The city owns approximately 13,000 lots throughout the city. We have asked for a real estate attorney who will be dedicated to processing quiet titles, working on the Adopt a Lot program, and generally tasked with getting their arms around all of these properties. They'll also be working on the conservatorship cases. We'll also be transferring 3 of the real estate assistants from finance to law, since their job duties are primarily in the paralegal space, filing of documents, tracking service, etc. We hope that this change can be the practical and boots on the ground assistance to the city's plans to create more affordable housing and create a city for all. The second is contracts. As I mentioned, we have already made huge strides in changing the contract process by speeding up the time from creation to execution. We asked for a contracts administrator for the missing piece, someone who tracks all the certificates of insurance, who can access all of the contracts, and who can be a resource for the departments when they have questions about whether a vendor is fulfilling the terms of the contract. By being housed in the legal department, the administrator can easily access legal advice on what to do if a vendor is not living up to their side of the bargain. Our hope is that this position will create a more efficient government that always gets the benefit that they bargained for. The third is a change in the area of legal fees and judgments. Unfortunately, those matters are privileged. So I ask that if you have any questions about that area, that we call an executive session. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And then I'll ask Ms. Davis if there's anything she wants to add.
The preliminarily approved budget that's been issued by the mayor provides for this new position that will help us with providing training and development. The role of ethics primarily is in giving advice and education and preventing problems. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. It's offset by about 75% through cuts to the operational expenses.
Thank you. Councilman Strasburg, is there anything you would?
Thank you. Well, my question, I thank you both for being here today or being present with us today. I'm sorry about your illness, Solicitor, but I am grateful for the work that you and your teams both do every day. And I was going to ask about the rationale for the increased spending on judgments. I will refrain from doing so based on your recommendation and can have that conversation with you one-on-one perhaps or privately in executive session. And I guess when it comes to ethics, I guess I'll make a comparison to PWSA, whose board I'm vice chair for right now. And I'm pleased to see that there's been a real culture shift prioritizing ethics and environmental compliance as well, which the city doesn't have the same sort of concern with, but certainly ethics is something that we all should be concerned about. And what I've noticed through their work is that, especially come holiday season, there have been, proactive questions asked by employees to their ethics officer. Am I allowed to accept this gift? Am I allowed to accept this invitation for a holiday party mixer sort of thing? What's the line? And I'm wondering if we're at that point at the city now where you're getting questions proactively from employees who aren't sure what to do in a certain situation.
That's right. It's been a really interesting and exciting to see those numbers increase over time. And with council's help, I think next year, hopefully, we'll get a couple changes to Chapter 197 and 198 and update our handbooks, our code of conduct. I've already started buying the paper, so we can get those issued next year, hopefully. Yeah.
And so people will have a resource to turn to that is the handbook, but also know very well that they can turn to you in your office.
A lot of the areas of ethics are pretty complicated, and there's different gray areas. So being able to ask for specific advice to those particular factual circumstances really makes a big difference.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that the numbers are ticking up because to me that's a sign that the city has a culture of taking this seriously, and I know you do everything you can to continue to remind people of their responsibility to ask questions when they don't know, and I hope that can continue, and you have the bandwidth for that to continue because it's only through, I think, almost constant reminding that people think about this and think to ask the question in the first place.
Right.
But no, other than that, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. I'll also just quickly thank you for your service. I know the last mandatory training we had to do, I think it was in here, where you did the training. Actually, I learned some things about accepting gifts and when you had to report and when you didn't, and when you were allowed to set even like a stipend for speaking or doing something. So it was very informative. So I thank you for what you've been able to do in your role, and I will certainly be willing to be helpful in revising the code next year as well.
Thank you.
Solicitor Kubiak, one question, I just want to make sure I understand. What you want to do with the real estate department and the individual or individuals that you're bringing on board to help expedite it. Can you just walk me through that real quick?
Sure. There are 3 positions right now that sit in the finance department, and they are the ones who work on the quiet title issues and the adopt-a-lot issues that we have. Right now, they are kind of acting in a paralegal position, and so we think it makes more sense for them to report directly to an attorney. And we hope that we'll be able to speed up that process because you may be aware that throughout the city that can take a long time. So this doesn't change at all. Council still has the full authority about which properties are getting moved. We're just here to make sure that once a decision gets made about whether a property should be moved, that we're doing it as quickly and expeditiously as possible. And then so those 3 positions will work with the real estate attorney to make sure that that's kind of their sole focus. And one of their goals is to move those processes along.
Okay, thank you. To say it currently can take a while is an understatement. And so, no, I think that's very important. How would they also work with the land bank?
So again, I don't know directly. I mean, the ones that we're thinking about are the ones that are currently under, the city,
Okay.
And haven't been transferred over to the land bank. But I will say that real estate attorney, because we do oversee the legal fees for the land bank. So that attorney will be reviewing that to make sure that whatever the land bank's doing is as efficient as possible as well.
You mentioned fees. You may not be able to answer this question, but since you brought it up, I'm gonna ask. Currently, if the land bank were to acquire a vacant parcel, we would owe the city, I believe it's $2,500. If we acquire a structure, we owe the city $5,000. Do you have any sense of where those numbers come from?
I don't. And I will say that's part of the goal of having a real estate attorney, is because I do want to have someone who can be on charge of all of these issues and has a really deep understanding of the real estate side of it all. And they will be here to be able to answer any of those questions.
Okay, thank you. To date, no one's been able to answer that question. So I would love to try to think that through and give that some more consideration. I think that was the only question I had. I also just thank you for your service over the year and wish you nothing but health and recovery.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Thank you. And thank you, Solicitor, for joining us. Thanks for being here in person, too. I just came out just really because I wanted to make sure that I thanked you publicly for all that you've been doing. I've been here for a while, and I've worked with a lot of different solicitors, and they've all been very nice and very, good. They've been good people. But I just want to say you have been just, amazing in the way that you respond to counsel, and I feel like you're a solicitor for the city of Pittsburgh. You're not serving just one body or one division here. So I just want to thank you for your work and your professionalism.
Thank
And
you
hope
so
you-
much,
and
Council
hope you feel
President. I'm
better.
glad I got the chance to thank you as well, because it has been, you have been so easy to work with, and I really appreciate when you bring us in. So I'm very grateful that we've had such a great relationship.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job by Mayor Gainey in selecting you. I'll just say it.
Thank you.
Since we are discussing real estate a little, I'll just take a moment to plug the need to really execute the tri-party agreement. But Councilman Strasburger?
Thank you. I had one additional question, and it should be very short. Solicitor Kubiak, I have asked this in previous budget hearings, and I don't know if you're able to answer this, but I often note the outside counsel that we retain and approve contracts for, or approve entering into a contract for, and the cost of that, and note that at times it can be quite expensive. I don't know what the breakdown is. Actually, I should have it in front of me. I would assume that is part of professional and technical services, although maybe not.
There's $200,000 for outside legal counsel for labor negotiations.
For labor negotiations specifically, but sometimes our outside legal counsel is for, an area of expertise that we might not have internally, whether it's tax attorneys or whether it's something else. So I wonder if if there is such thing as sort of an internal audit, without the controller necessarily, but like an internal audit of the department and the amount that is spent on outside counsel, and whether there's a threshold at which point it makes sense to just find that expertise and bring it in-house. Like, is there a threshold, and have we reached it in any sort of issue areas, or are we still well-rounded enough that we can keep our proposed levels of expertise, areas of expertise that we have or that are in the proposed budget, and that's satisfactory to you?
That's a great question, Councilwoman Strasburg. I will say it's one of my concerns as well. And some of these contracts were pre-existing before I started, and certainly as you've seen, they can be extremely expensive. Some of them, the issues I would say we have no choice on, because we have hired outside counsel for conflict issues. So that the city, as you know, represents the city of Pittsburgh as the municipal corporation, but also represents all the city employees that are sued. And sometimes our legal position conflicts with one of the city employees. And so therefore, we're responsible for making sure that those city employees have their own counsel. So we can't get around that scenario. And then there are also scenarios where just the attorneys that I have are, because of their relationship with city employees, are conflicted out. So we'll have to hire outside counsel. But in those cases, and I think tax is certainly one of them, We, years ago, there was an attorney within the city department who was strong on tax. We are starting to, I would say, train up Kristen Erickson on tax issues so that hopefully in the future we are less reliant on it. We've also hired attorneys because of real estate expertise. And again, I hope this new real estate position will keep us from having to do that as often in the future as well. So our goal, you are correct, is always to make sure we have the expertise in-house or that we train it up. But sometimes the cases are, I would say, so important that we do need to bring in some extra help.
Thank you. Glad to know that you're thinking of this in the same way that I am, and I certainly trust your judgment there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect, we were also joined by President Smith as well as Councilwoman Gross. Councilwoman Gross, do you have any questions or comments?
I already went. I really don't have anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. So I was listening in from my office, and I only caught part of the conversation about the 3 taxing bodies and the land bank costs. I think, Councilman, you were asking about the current costs, and we were.
So I
Yeah,
was
would you mind?
asking where the numbers have come from. It's my understanding that if the land bank were to acquire property off of the city, that we would owe the city $2,500 for vacant parcels, $5,000 for structures, and I have no idea or sense of why or where or how those costs were created, as opposed to looking at it on an individual basis. And so I was just curious because no one's really been able to explain that to me.
And so, in the answer, so we don't know. And so, in the hundreds, I don't have the table up in front of me, but I had an intern go back 8 years, as we talked about last year at the URA meeting, and look at all of the city's transfers of properties, city council's transfers of properties to the URA. So those were not billed under the 2,000 and 5,000?
So that's what the city also charges the URA, which is why I'm assuming they just carried those figures, and it's just a flat fee
Got
each
it.
time. That's what the city charges the URA. So I'm assuming they're just carrying that same flat fee over to the land bank. But again, when I first asked the URA, they're like, well, that's just how it's always been done. So they weren't sure where the figures came from.
So thank you for opening that line of questioning. Even if we can't kind of get the answers in front of us today, I think it's really important that we all understand, the table that my office, our intern did for us was kind of going back through 8 years of side yard transfers. And so what really are the real costs, right? That are either in cash or in overhead, right? Like how much organizational time and expenses, or how many hours do we have to allocate in an organizational chart that results in, how many side yard transfers can we do? Or transfers to the URA was like a third column, and then transfers to property reserve, which, for the record, there have not been any in almost 4 years now, I think. They were suspended, which I don't understand because it's an ordinance that we do the property reserve. But they have not been carried out. They haven't been, they've been frozen. So, kind of like which is the lowest overhead? I'm curious. The lowest cost, and so there's both the debate that we've been having for 8 years when we started with the land bank legislation of like, well, maybe there's a way to do this that's more in a shorter timeline. But the goal is hopefully also to get it to be a shorter, a less burdensome overhead for the constituent or for the city. And I'm now just kind of questioning, what are those things? Like, let's get, it's 8 years later now, let's look at what those updates are. So none of these questions can be answered today, but sometimes these things really help us clarify questions. And I feel like that's maybe where I am right now. So thank you, Councilman, for starting that inquiry. So I'm glad and supportive to see the additional 1.3 of a full-time employee in the law department for this thing. I mean, that is a teeny tiny drop in the city bucket for improving our real estate transfers. Probably I would support more than 1.3, less than a third of a full-time employee. And I'm glad to see that we should be adding capacity, I think, in the law department internally, because one way or the other, even if we get the land bank up and running magically, within the hours up and running, we're going to have our own staffing and overhead on our side, no matter what. So thank you for being here, and thank you for kind of speaking to these issues, and I'll just leave it at that, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, sorry.
I just want to just mention that, I think we sit here, we're trying to juggle, we had meetings this morning, trying to figure out how we can balance the needs for the city and the amount of people we need to do the jobs for our constituents and the budget that we have to work with. And, we can't give people a pay raise and hire new people and also attract new people if we're not paying them. So it's like a whole, catch-22. It's just a vicious cycle, actually. And so, I know that a lot of our departments are doing very little with a lot with very little. And, we're always asking the administration to, reevaluate their positions and to do things, and we're trying to do what we can over here. But it really is a conversation we have to have about how we're attracting talent, with our pays, and how we can make sure that we have enough people in each of these departments to do the jobs that we're asking them to do, or some of them by law are required to do. Like the controller mentioned yesterday, he can't even keep up with the audits that need to be done. And so I think that those are things that we really have to have a conversation about. But I also want to thank you, Director Davis, for your work as well, too. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. There's nothing else, then I need a motion to recess.
So moved.
Second.
We are in recess. Thank you.